Okay, so hey, the Kickstarter is going pretty well. This is about as well.
We're gonna get to make this game,
and we get to make it, which is sweet because I haven't been really making games for a while, so I'm super excited about that.
You have been making games that you can
That's true.
show.
That's true. That's true.
But this is the first time we've gotten kind of everybody together from different backgrounds and representing kind of different departments.
It's going to be
that's
awesome.
exciting.
So John, people know you. You are
John.
I'm
you're
John Swisshelm, designer.
designing. And then we've got Derek. People are familiar with Derek. This is the first time you're on camera, I believe.
I think for this
Massive
project.
Chalice.
Yeah.
The man behind the pin.
I've
Yeah,
just
that's
been hiding
awesome.
behind the streaming.
You've definitely been, people have seen your work a lot, but
People-
it's cool that you're here.
They've been tuning in for art and for like death metal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's been great. So people just like
And then
your
we have
playlist.
newcomer Chad Dawson. Hey,
Hi, everybody.
Chad. So, I mean, we're still not sure exactly what's going to happen, but I'm pretty sure you're going to be working on Massive Chalice. So
That's right.
that's awesome. And you're senior programmer is your
Unlike-
official title.
Unlike Brad, I have been making games.
Yeah, exactly. So you were lead programmer on the Cave,
Right? And
Lead programmer on
on
Stacking.
Stacking.
and then senior programmer
programmer
on
now.
Brutal Legend.
Yeah, senior programmer Brutal Legend.
That's
More gameplay side
It's
on
an
that.
impressive. It's an impressive resume, Chad.
And then I did some games before coming to Double Fine.
Yes, yes, and actually we should talk about those because you worked on some RTSs, so you have strategy game experience.
I did. I worked at Stainless Steel Studios in Boston from 99 to 2006 or so.
Sweet. So you worked on
And we did RTS games there. We did one called Empire Earth.
Fire Earth. You know
Which was
what?
probably our biggest, most
People
famous
have
one.
asked me a lot of questions. So that is the RTS that has more civilization type elements in it, right? Where it's like
It is.
you
It
start
go-
with
it goes
sticks
through
and
time.
stones, and you
Yeah,
go
it
all the
goes
way up
through
to
time.
mechs. People have asked me about that. I feel like that's been a big
Oh, that's
question
cool.
of like an epic timeline. Are you gonna put huge technology things into it? And it's like, I feel like it's a really cool idea.
I still
just think
meet
that
people
it's,
who are playing that game. Like, that's what surprises me. I went on a trip to the Galapagos, like, remote. And there was a little family and kids were on it. I'm talking to them and they're like, oh, do you make games? And I'm like, oh yeah, I do games. And I'm sure they're going to ask me like, did you write Halo or something? Something famous game. And they're
You work
like,
on Madden?
No,
I
they're
don't
like,
work on
our
Madden.
favorite game
Call
is
of Duty?
Empire Earth. And I'm
Dude,
like,
you make Call of Duty?
no,
Wait, no,
that's what they
seriously,
said.
they were
The kids were like, their favorite game is
the game that
Empire
you
Earth.
made.
And I'm like, somebody set you up for this, you know? Like,
It's a plant. You're
that
looking
game's
for
like
the hidden
that
cameras.
game's like 10 years old, you know. It's like, who plays that still? But it was their favorite game. You know,
That's
their parents
amazing.
got it for them to learn history and and stuff.
The
So,
history of mechs in the far-flung future.
yeah, well, that game kind of is fast and loose with history.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
But I still think some people see it as like a history game, sort of. So we did that one, and then we did one called Empire's Dawn of the Modern World, which was a little smaller in scope, but a little deeper. Why Empire Earth was really broad brush across all of time. That one was a smaller scope. And then we did one called Rise and Fall, which was the last game the studio made, and we actually closed down before finishing it, but it still got released. And that was a mix
one
of
that-
like third-person action and RTS.
It had a lot of very similar to what we were
What
attempting
we did in
with Brutal
Brutal,
Legend.
I think that probably was one of the reasons why I was hired here, was because
Yeah.
we didn't have a lot of RTS experience on the Brutal Legend team. That's about when I came in. Brutal Legend had been in development for about 8 months or so. There was some really early prototypes to stuff when I came
Yeah.
in.
So, how do you feel about turn-based strategy?
I like it. I play it a lot, actually. Civ and XCOM and Jagged Alliance.
Those are
favorites.
all good video games.
Yeah.
Those are all good video games. So I wanted to talk about the tactics, the tactical layer. I thought we could start with the baseline that we have and the things that we're talking about. And John and I have talked a lot about it from the design side. We thought that because it's more melee focused, probably wouldn't have cover in the game, but having
so I mean,
maybe?
talk about when
I mean,
you
it's
say
still,
that,
open to it.
if you're behind a wall and you're getting shot at, you're not going to get hit through the wall necessarily, unless it's like a wall-piercing magic missile. But I mean, so there's a difference between maybe having an explicit cover system with cover enter and exit animations like a new XCOM versus, I mean, there's cover in original XCOM. It's just not as explicit, and also it's kind of hidden from you. You have to kind of guess, oh, I'm behind the tree. That's going to make it harder to be shot, right?
Right, and that's why I think line of sight mechanics are a good replacement. I mean, like, of course, new XCOM has cover, and it also has line of sight,
Right.
and these other things. But I think that you can not have cover, but still have line of sight, and then you have those, like, being around a corner or behind something,
Right.
and have that actually impact the battle and be an important thing. Like, I think that that's like a fine way to go. And we were kind of talking that, like, okay, line of sight, fog of war, and height. Those are like height on the actual terrain. Would be the three main kind of factors that we use when building the tactical layer. And so, yeah, like, programming wise, we can do that.
Yeah, all that factors in. I mean, definitely as we're looking at procedural maps or doing maps, when you start saying height, that can mean a lot of different things. And how do you go up? Like, do you have walkways over other stuff, or do you have hills, or do you have balconies? Or as we start thinking about the settings that we want to put our maps in. I know Derek's done some awesome kind of concept work that shows sort of outdoor fields and walls and things.
Yeah, lots of different heights of
how that height plays out, and obviously pathfinding across different heights can be a little tricky if you have circular stairs and things like that. I mean, on the tech side, as we start talking about, that's where my mind goes. Start thinking like, how does our current technology that we have on our other games, how's that going to map to this one? Luckily, we've done a lot of games here at Stainless Steel. I mean,
at
Double
Stainless
Fine.
Steel. You just said at Stainless Steel.
That's because she pulled me back in.
Flashback.
That's because she flashed me back in.
Oh,
No, here at Double
Jim's not
Fine,
watching
we've
this.
done lots of games.
Chad's
And,
maybe Chad won't be on Massive Chalice
yeah,
after all.
exactly. Here at Double Fine, we've done a lot.
And we have, and so we're using the Brutal technology, which is like the same engine we've used
Exactly,
for a
yeah.
lot of games here. All of our 3D games have used that same tech. So we do have like a really solid baseline for this, but we've never made a turn-based strategy game before.
That's true.
So like what, in terms of like the fog of war and line of sight stuff, like is there like a lot of like new tech that we're gonna have to be looking at for those systems? Or, I mean, it's just a custom system that has to be written, right?
Yeah, we did sort of a fog of war in Brutal Legend. We didn't fill it in with fog when you couldn't see it and stuff.
Right.
But we had that notion of line of sight and distances that characters could see and shoot and spot things at. I don't think that'll be too technically challenging. I mean, I think our engine will adapt to that pretty well. And the pathfinding, obviously real-time pathfinding is a bit more complicated than turn-based. It's nice that it gives...
Just rub some A-star on that thing?
Yeah,
Just
the
rub
turn-based stuff gives
some
you,
A-star on it?
because you're not doing real-time, you have a little bit more time for calculation and thinking about it, and as well as the players having more time, the AI has more time, so that's sort of a nice luxury to think what we can do with that and how smart we want the AI to be and how many strategies we're going to work out for attacking.
Speaking of fog of war, one of the things I thought about on the last art stream you were doing was a lot of these environment pieces you've been doing are like very atmospheric. They almost feel like you can only see to a certain edge, and I'd love to figure out how we can get some of that feel into it. So it's not just this like gradient from visible to black. One of the things that to me that always makes it feel like it's nighttime, or it either feels like it's nighttime or I'm just like looking at board game pieces. So it'd be interesting just on the visual side, how can we express?
It's tricky
some
too,
of these
because
things?
like you have like the top-down view, right? And so how do you show that without making it look like black? Like you get the black border, or you get like a foggy border?
Because it's like you want people to be able to scroll over there,
Right.
but like you don't even necessarily want them to like scout the terrain a lot, right? It's like, so the going to total blackness is probably right, but it just looks kind of
weird.
Terrible,
Maybe
right?
find
Like,
a middle
just-
ground, yeah.
ugh.
Yeah.
Like you could make it look a lot better. So it's like, where's the compromise? Because it's sort of cool if you can see a little bit and scout a little bit further than.
So maybe you'd see like where a hill is.
Yeah,
But you wouldn't know what's on the hill, but you could tell there was a hill there.
Yeah, so having like a representation of like what some of the features of the terrain are, but not all of the like little details of like where the trees are and whatever. I don't know. I mean,
It
that's
could be
just
cool
an
to have like
idea.
a super abstracted like view of it in the
That's
fog of war.
actually really cool.
So like wherever you've explored is like really developed. It's like very structural. It looks like the game, and then everything else looks
looks
like a
not
weird
the game.
abstract weird thing.
It looks like the Matrix. It just has.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing
totally.
we want to think about is what we're doing with the camera. Like XCOM had that where you could go down and kind of see behind the shoulder. But obviously the fog is going to look very different that way. Is it this wall of fog? Or, seeing it from the top down.
Right.
You render it differently. It obscures things differently. as we start looking at different camera options.
And I would
Thinking how
love
we're
to.
gonna do that.
I mean, I would love to do that. Just like we have so much experience here doing like real-time games and like, there's like short little cutscenes of like getting the camera down low so you can see your hero, you can see the enemies closer. Like it's really fantastic. Like I really like I want to get that into the game. Like that's a very high priority for me. Just making, because I think that's one thing that new XCOM did that was excellent, was that it made a turn-based strategy game feel like more exciting than oftentimes what a
totally.
turn-based strategy game can be. Because once you get enthralled by the game, once you get super like deep into the mechanics and you're like totally into it, that stuff tends to fall away, and it's like it's not as important. But when you're first coming to the game new and you're like oh, like it's like you want it to look and feel impressive. And I think that was something that new XCOM did in a way that was great, with all the like kind of super quick cinematic cuts. Some of them were a little bit long. When it goes into those like super slow-mo, like the super slow-mo like sniper like lining up his shot, and like I thought they could have cranked that up a little bit. But
it also showed.
yeah,
it also gave you a lot of good information about what was happening. Like I never felt like, well, what happened there? Did that guy get hit? I don't know. That never happens, and to me in the new XCOM, like it was always like the pacing. I thought was really well done, and it was really easy to kind of follow the line of action to say, okay, here's this guy. He's taking this shot. Here's the result of that. Cool, it hit or it didn't hit. And I don't have a guy just kind of like collapse in the middle of the level and be like, what happened to him? Oh, he received fatal wounds, 5 turns ago that I didn't even realize he got shot. That kind of thing. So I think like, doing it for a cinematic appeal, but also doing it for to be informative to the gameplay, so that the player has a better grok. He can grok easily what's going on.
Yeah.
It's cool, and it's neat. So I think like it has to work really, hand in hand with the UI and the way that data is presented. And that's another thing we'll have to talk about artistically, is how do we have the numbers, represented and the UI represented in a way that fits the world, doesn't feel like I am a commander in the sky base, because that's not what's happening in Massive Chalice.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing of like how we handle. I mean, we haven't decided like exactly what the fiction is going to be around. Like you're the immortal ruler, and like what does that mean? Like I think that whatever the fiction is, you're going to have to be like bound to the capital city, or bound to the chalice that's in the capital city. Like however that's going to work. So you need to be just like observing this fight and directing the heroes and,
Get your
and stuff
orb.
like that.
You're, like,
Your
looking into an orb.
your palantir. That's what somebody, Brandon, he was like, he suggested, some sort of palantir that you're looking into.
Maybe you're looking into the chalice. It's more like I don't know. That's like Harry Potter, right?
Yeah. You can see it. That's
Murky
cool.
liquid, you see the bad
There's
one.
also, we were talking about UI.
There's some cool shaders on top of it.
And
It's like all rippling.
and somebody had, so we got this great suggestion from a fan that the UI could age over the epic timeline, so that it would start out and it would be very pristine, and then as you go forward, it like moss grows on the like woody parts, and like the metal rusts and whatever. It's sort of like feels like the whole thing is like getting older. I just totally burped there. I hope nobody saw that. It's awesome that we have cameras here to capture all of these things, so that when I like have to burp mid-sentence, it's just totally captured.
Keep it to
everybody.
burpee.
Worst things have happened in meetings.
So, so that, I mean, I don't know like how feasible that is, but that's just another one of those ideas that like has come from the community, and it's just like, holy crap, like that's a really cool idea that we could potentially implement in this game. I mean, and everything costs time and money and resources and all this stuff, but like it's really cool being in this like this blue sky phase, the unreasonable optimism phase of like working on the game, where we can just like talk about all this stuff. And I think that would be a cool thing to explore with the UI, especially if it happens so slowly when time is passing that you might not even notice it until you're several hours in, and then you're like, why is there like rust on this edge? Yeah. What is that? It could be really cool.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's just two states that we can kind of blend between. It'd be interesting. It's all about creating a texture, right? A visual texture for the world, and everything you're doing doesn't have to map one to one. It's not like, I'm like physically this immortal king is doing this one thing that's then causing this guy to move to the left, but just creating a texture and feel for that, And I think looking at some of the earlier Blizzard games really reminds, that's what I think about is like Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2, and just seeing how like those interfaces kind of brought me into the world, just through, even looking at like again like StarCraft, like every one of the races has a different framing for the interface. And
Warcraft 3,
cool.
like amazing. Like I love that in Warcraft 3 the mouse pointer is like a different thing based on what race you're playing.
Yeah,
That is so excellent. Like I just like those little touches when it comes to UI, especially like font choice. Like whenever I'm playing a game and they use just like an Arial font, it just makes me like, it makes me go completely insane. Like when I see it, because it's like, here's this opportunity to like flavor your game, right? To increase the aesthetic vision of the game. You know, just like it's such a simple thing to just be like, you know, like, hey, when the programmer puts it in, sure, they put it in as an Arial font and they're working on the UI, cool, but like it doesn't take that much. Like the amount of programming support for an Arial for just a standard font versus a non-standard font is almost the same, right? I mean, it's like it's the same system. So just like they just chose to not get a different font that would fit their game in a better way. And I know there's like readability issues, and you can go down that rabbit hole.
The tricky thing too is like suddenly they want it to be another language, and does this font have all those strange characters that have little umlauts? We ran into that with Brutal. You know, like every vowel had an umlaut over it. So all our fonts support that kind of thing. You got to think of that ahead of time.
Yeah,
but
and we're going to need to support that for backer bloodlines as well. There's been some people talking about like, can we have, you know, like what special characters can we have? Can we have our bloodlines be in a different language? I mean, I don't know. We'll have to figure some of that out.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
But it's like, I think it's another cool place. Like, so yeah, like changing the mouse pointer, like changing the font, like doing all these things, just trying to make the game feel more like a holistic kind of, I don't know. I just really, we're not going to have an Arial font in the game. Like, we're going to have a different font that looks nice, that fits the sort of flavor of the world.
The milieu.
The milieu of the world. I love that word. It's so weird.
Well, definitely when you look at turn-based games, UI is a bigger part of it. You know, with real-time games and stuff, it's you kind of want to hide the UI because you want to see the game world and it's constantly moving and flowing. But we're going to be paused essentially all the time between turns. So you're going to want to have a UI up. You're going to want to have things to select. And when we get to the timeline stuff, moving your, I don't know, what do we call them? The people in the keeps, the lords?
The
Heroes, lords.
Yeah. Right, the regents or whatever. They there's going to be a whole UI for that. So UI, I think, is going to be a bigger part of this game than many of our other ones.
There's definitely going to be a ton of UI. Like, I was just thinking about, like, all of the different, you know, just potential screens that we'll have in the game, and it's a lot, you know, like the bloodline management stuff, the research management stuff, hero equipment management, and you know, that's all on the strategy layer.
Right.
And then that doesn't even get into like the actual tactical layer about like, you know, just being able to see readouts on all of the readouts. That makes it sound so sci-fi. So you're like, you know, character sheets. That's
your stats.
fancy. You know, like the kind of stats on all the guys and seeing like all those things, and then like, you know, percent chance to hit and like all this stuff. There's a lot of UI in the game. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something we're gonna have to budget for.
I mean, with Iron Brigade, you guys did some crazy UI for putting the mech together.
It required a lot of iteration
and I remember
going through that thing.
Lot, yeah.
It was very difficult. And actually, my first stab was way off. Like, wow, we changed that.
I remember some of those
early
ones. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that's, you know, iteration is important, and it's nice to do it like when it didn't cost us that much because it was still pretty white box, and we were able to test it with people and stuff like that. It was still wireframed up, and before we did like a full art pass on it and everything.
And talking about tech for that, like we'll probably be using Scaleform. We have Scaleform implemented that lets us do UI elements in Flash and then import them to the game engine, and that's pretty helpful. So that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to take time to iterate those UIs and design them and have them and test them. I mean, just doing a lot of like focus testing. Focus testing makes it sound like a weird publisher when I say that, though.
Well, and it's
really
also
just play testing with like with people. Kleenex testing. I had heard it described as Kleenex testing.
Tissue testing.
It's really gross. I don't know if people are aware of that term, but like it's really gross because, you know, once somebody experiences the game once, they're ruined. Like a Kleenex.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
I was thinking like they were gonna cry. They were gonna blow their nose at the end.
No. That's all it means is that it's like, you know, each person that can only do it once.
Right,
it's like you want to get a constant influx of like new people that haven't experienced it before to find all the problems and stuff. So we'll be doing a lot of that. Like,
and as we show the game, I think like UI is one of those things that's because it's going to require so much iteration. It's probably going to be ugly for a long time. You know, like the more basic we can get it just so we can see the information layers and figure out how things will work, and then working on the programming side. I mean, I think it's going to be ugly. Like even as the world is going to look beautiful and the characters look beautiful, probably gonna have some really ugly UI for quite a while.
Yeah,
and
if we do that
fine.
kind of aging over time, that's definitely going to come in at the end.
At the very end.
once
last
we
week.
yeah.
The very end. last week. That's it.
But you want to get it locked down a little bit better before you start spending our time on. Because it's 2D stuff that's going to be drawn, and that takes some time to do right.
Yeah. Also, talking about that Kleenex testing, it'll be really good with the early access stuff. Like the people that back it, I think it's $50 and above. Like that'll be fantastic to have their input at that level, so that we can refine it and tweak it and tune it and whatever.
Yeah, I mean that's a great place for that final polish pass and tuning, and just difficulty tuning and all this stuff, because it's by that point we will have been playing the game since the inception, and it's really hard to step out of that role and see how people play it for the first time. So we'll get people in here playing it for sure. We have our $1,000 backers that will be coming in and testing even earlier than that, which will be awesome.
Fantastic.
And they'll get to play it and give their feedback. And so I think that just having a steady stream of feedback at the right times throughout development will help.
Yeah. So Derek, you've been pretty quiet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I get it.
I'm thinking.
Also, pictures worth 1,000 words, so you don't have to say much, right? But we have some new stuff from Peter Chan. I thought it would be cool to go through this and talk about it. So he's been just collecting cool reference and interesting, inspirational stuff and kind of throwing it at us. And we haven't had a lot of time to actually sit down and talk with him during the Kickstarter because things have been so crazy. But he sent over some new stuff that I thought we could talk about here, just visually. And Chad, you've done a little bit of graphic stuff. And there was actually a mystery project that we're not allowed to talk about that had some new kind of programming techniques that on the graphic side that could be really applicable to the way that we were talking about this. But so this first one that he sent over these are just style, generic kind of style references that he sent over.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of is this actual paper craft or is it just 3D?
I think it's
just 3D artwork that's kind of faceted, right?
It's hard to tell because 3D is so good now.
Yeah, 3D is so good. It's you look at them. So yeah, looking at this wolf and the turtle and the spider and this yak and the deer.
I love the big yak on the right. That's my favorite one.
Yak is really cool. It's a very
horns, especially.
It's a very interesting style that has those being able to see the faceted polygons. It almost reminds me of a high res intentional Warcraft 3.
Yeah.
It's Warcraft 3 units were so lo-fi and low poly, but on purpose, or I mean not necessarily on purpose. It was just necessary. It was a necessity at that point because the machines were just not strong enough, and you wanted to have a bunch of units, and it was really important. So it's kind of an interesting take, and that's something that I really like. When we were working on Brazen, I thought that was a cool thing. We're using high-end technology to do stop motion animation in a way that's believable and kind of harkens back to old school stuff. So this is kind of in the same vein where it's oh, we could it's really high res, but you still see the facets of the individual regions on the character, and that I think that's an interesting thing to explore and see if it could fit. There's also we haven't talked to Peter about this, but I think it's also awesome that in the upper right there's just a magic card. It just looks awesome. I mean the artists that they get for Magic now these days are really, really incredible. Yeah. And that's a crowned Ceratok. I totally know what that is from Gatecrash.
But it's neat the style,
It's
Brad.
a 4/3 trample for 4.
Like you said, it looks like it's folded paper. It doesn't look like it's just a low poly model.
Yeah.
And
there's some overlap too. So it almost to me the deer I can kind of I mentally put in fur there because there's some overlap in these polygons too.
Also,
I didn't mean to catch up.
I like how he included the bottom birds, just because having the super polygonal stuff mixed with the really rounded, elegant shapes could be a really interesting look.
It's cool.
Yeah, and it definitely reinforces that this is not low poly. This is
stylized.
This is really faceted and polygonal.
Yeah, we want it to be a really intentional stylistic choice, as opposed to it being
it's not cheaping out.
Just
on
looking
modeling.
shitty, right? That's
you have 150 polys per character.
Right,
for sure.
So this is one possible thing. He also sent over this one for the characters.
Yeah, these are awesome.
And this is it's really interesting how
It's a neat style.
like ignoring the environment for a minute, like just looking at the characters, it's interesting like how this style mixes with the I always mess it up, the plakat steel.
Plakat steel.
Plakat
Yeah.
steel. That's probably how you say it. That's really close. We should get Oliver in here and ask him like, what? How do we say
We
this?
gotta get Oliver.
But it's cool that it has a little bit more of a modern feel than the plakat steel stuff. So I think it's very cool, especially like I just love the random Christopher Walken that's thrown in there as well.
Yeah.
Like that's super awesome. And like yeah, there could we could mess around with mixing this style in with the plakat steel stuff and see what comes out of it. It's a really cool direction.
I could see this could be an interesting way to incorporate the facial wrinkles during aging. Like they're really well defined, some of these facial features. And so you look at the guy in the top right, and he's got a very smooth face, versus like Christopher Walken gets some stuff coming in the cheeks, and then in the middle there, like
That's Daniel Day-Lewis.
Daniel Day-Lewis. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, I can see it now.
Yep. But like we were talking about like how can we do that and represent like wrinkles through a face in a stylized way that doesn't look like just like a crazy ZBrush, like I'm putting in pockmarks and stuff. And this might be an interesting way to get
the hard part about it is like, is that texture? Is that
Is it
in the
just
model?
shading?
Is that a shader?
Yeah, how would so
You know?
we've talked about this just a very brief amount of like I'm really of the mind that we need like separate character models throughout the stages of life so that they're more discrete, so that you can really see like super strong changes in the silhouette and size and girth and whatever of like the limbs and stuff like that for the male and female characters, like as they go through their life. Like we've talked about 4 or 5 different kind of like distinct stages, and again we'll have to like spec that out and see how much pressure that puts on art and all those other things. But like I think that's a really important thing. But even within one of those stages of life, having some procedural things going on with the characters would be really excellent. Would be really great. So yeah, I don't know exactly how we would do it. Chad, do you have ideas?
It's tricky. I mean, you talk about the other kind of project we worked on, and Lee Petty was a strong advocate for the art look on that. And sort of one of the things we prototyped was a lot more painted textures for areas that had shadow. So rather than just procedurally darkening areas with shadow, you'd actually blend in a different layer that was painted that would do a more stylized shadowy area. And it gave it a different look. I mean, I think with all this, being able to capture a different look, a different rendering style, even a different kind of painting style. We all love Derek's images, and part of me is like, wow, I wish we could just make a game look exactly like his sword art, kind of thing. Like, but obviously platforms have limitations, and we're still learning different ways to render. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to try to explore that space a little bit. One thing I think about is that we're going to have the different bloodlines, and you're going to be mixing them and trying to get traits from different ones. And are we going to have a bloodline that's like all blonde, and another one that's like dark hair and short? Or what are you guys thinking design-wise, and how does that come in as well? We not only have aging, but we also have, this whole bloodline might have green eyes. Like, are those traits something we're thinking that you're going to notice?
Yeah, definitely skin tone and hair color. Those are the two things that seem like the big ticket. Like I don't know if it's going to go down to the detail of eye color, but it could.
Right.
Eye color, that wouldn't be a hard thing to support in the game, especially if we're already doing skin tone. You're right that you don't necessarily see it all the time. There
might be one line that always has beards, even on the women.
Yeah, that's awesome. That should beards should totally be like a bloodline trait. That's awesome. But I thought we could easily do like a simple dominant recessive genes for like hair color and eye color and stuff like that. I think that would be really, really cool. And it would be just a simple, subtle thing, but I think the people that are paying attention would like realize that like, oh, like this red hair is like pretty rare, and if you marry these people together, like their kids probably won't have red hair. Like that's interesting.
And we have like plus 100 to gingers. Go ahead together right here. Gingers are gonna be amazing. They're gonna kick so much ass. They're good at fighting demons because they have no souls.
Yeah, exactly.
But I just think art-wise, that's a challenge that we're going to face. Is not only do we have young to old, but also we want to do different variations. So we need to come up with a style that can capture all that and not just have that be washed out.
One thing that I've noticed in a lot of Japanese games, they do a lot of that stuff in the texture side. like a lot of painted textures. They don't quite rely on the sort of ZBrush, like really like a
The
bump
Marcus
map, really
Phoenix
bump mappy.
scar on,
Yeah.
oh, it's so craggy, his face.
Which could be an interesting way to approach, which I like, you mentioned, I like that idea. Like, you could have like a face of a middle-aged guy, but then have like an older texture over it. And depending on how it's done, it could be effective, I think.
But that scar thing could be cool too, where we have these people who are just kept back at the castle who never go out to battle, that are just eat the food and make the babies, right? And like they should look maybe a little fatter.
And they research the demon technology. Come on, they do other things. They don't just eat the food and make the babies. All right, that's
well, the people out on the battlefield like could look more scarred or more.
That's true. They're definitely
more battle wear. I mean, maybe that'll come out through their equipment, right? So, yeah, that's another thing too. Is we haven't really talked a lot about equipment. Like that's sort of been tossed around, but I don't know. Is that something we want to?
I mean, we can talk about it. Like, I think that you know, on the extreme end, you have like the World of Warcraft style where you've got, I think 16 slots or 18 slots or something for stuff, and then I think on the other side you've got more the new XCOM, like they reduced it down to 4, and I think the right number is probably somewhere in between both of those. You know, I think that, you know, the really extreme hardcore fantasy stuff where you have to worry about the 18 slots or whatever, I think that's just too much management when you have to manage all these heroes. Like, I think we want to bring it down and streamline it a little bit. Because that's the thing, like, I know that there'll be a lot of people watching this that, you know, they think about the new XCOM thing and they say, oh, that's like, it's way too limiting, you know, there aren't enough choices in there. But I thought they did a really good job, like, with some of those slots, particularly, like your equipment slot. It's like you could either take a grenade or a med kit or the, like, improved armor or the, you know, it's like there were just, because everything was condensed down, it did give you some like really excellent choices in terms of like what of these 5 choices for this one slot, they're all mutually exclusive. Which one are you going to go with? And it does put some pressure on you, like thinking about it.
I think that was good.
I like that part, but I think there's maybe a little bit more choice, like especially weapons. Like I felt like the weapon track in the new XCOM was maybe a little disappointing, where you know, like your sniper was always using a sniper rifle, right? And it was like, so you'd start with sniper rifle, and then you get the laser sniper, and then you get the plasma sniper, and that was, you know, there were pretty much 3 main weapons for that guy. They had pistols, and I just was never really engaging in the pistol combat of.
They had a whole like pistol track for him, but
it
definitely felt like a very linear progression. And then once you, I mean, and that was one. I think it'd be more interesting, especially if you have. I mean, if we do things like knockback, like, okay, I can take the hammer, and that's going to do less damage than a sword, but it'll have a greater chance to knock back, or stun. Like, it depends on what kind of melee mechanics we can get in there. I think that'll be really cool.
And fantasy games offer a lot of that stuff, though, right? It's like, there's a lot of things, just with like left hand, right hand, you know, that's something that I think would be simple to do. Like,
we could do handedness as a trait.
That's really cool.
So your
really cool.
Your
like
lefty ginger will be really rare, but there's a special dagger that has to be. You know, it's like left-handed scissors you can get from the left-hand store. Like only lefties can use this thing. Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Awesome. But fantasy games offer a lot of those like cool trade-offs with just, you know, like just take like a warrior. It's like, you know, a big 2-handed weapon versus like
sword and
you know, the sword and board stuff versus the like dual wielding. Like even that goes a long way in terms of like, how am I equipping this guy? Like, what role do I want him to have on the battlefield? You can have 2 warriors that are very, very different based on what equipment you give them, and I think that's really cool. And it's something that I really want to make sure we have in the game, because it's like, you know, even if we do have very few equipment slots, making sure that there are great choices for every one of them is really great. It also, I mean, the other thing that I've thought about is that, you know, these characters are going to get, they're going to age and die, and so it's like, you know, we don't want to have too much customization on them, where you're, you know, before every fight you have to like fill out a giant talent tree and 18 equipment slots for every character. Like, I think that would become really, really tedious. Like, you know, it does give you a lot of control, but you know, at the cost of like, you know, spending 20 minutes on the gear up screen before you like go into one of these missions. So like, I think we just have to find the right balance between like character customization and
those family heirlooms would probably
the relics.
be the relics. Like, I could see a shield being a family relic. You know, like this family's known for defense, maybe even they get a stat boost or something like that to defense or something like that. And
that's awesome.
They pass down this shield, and it's got dents in it from previous battles and has their family logo on it and stuff. But that could make a cool relic, as much as a sword or a staff or a
and
cape.
we also talked about. I love the nickname system from the new XCOM. So
cool.
having a fantasy flavored version of that is really cool, because there's all sorts of cool names that we can give the characters that feel very fantastical and stuff. But also extending that system to the weapons, especially when the weapons are going to feel more permanent than the actual characters themselves, right? That's sort of what you're talking about. Like if that shield is thing, like having a sword, and if it gets enough
Demon's
Bane, it gets Demon's Bane, like Foe Crusher. You're like,
the
oh, that's
World
awesome,
Slayer.
And then letting people rename those if they want to, or whatever.
Right.
Just having a big pool that gets pulled out of. People also just suggested, like, based on which demons it's killed and like what this weapon has done, or what how many successful blocks the shield has had from what kinds of attacks, that would actually change what name it gets. I don't know. Cool. And those features are amazing, because the bang for buck on a feature like that is incredibly high. Like that's a system that's pretty simple to do on the programming end, right? Like, I mean, that's not a huge investment, and I think it has a huge amount of like emotional payoff for the player, where they get really invested in like these pieces of equipment that are getting names and then being passed down through the generations and stuff like that. It's very cool.
My favorite part about that, especially in RPGs, is when they have the T-pose and you get to equip it to their chest, or equip it to the right and left arm. That's the best part, which I was sad that they didn't have that in XCOM. But
it was really disparate, right? It was
it was like sort of like, this is what you're gonna take with you.
And I think with armor, like, we'll have to figure that out. Like, I don't think you're going to be changing like your left pauldron as opposed to your right greave, but it might be, maybe we can get it into a couple pieces. I did like how I wish there were more options in new XCOM for armor types. Like, I felt like I didn't get enough use out of some of the cooler stuff, like the ghost armor and the jetpack. But it was really easy to tell who had what, and I didn't have to worry about creating some weird like set bonus like in Diablo, which is awesome if you've got one character. But if you've got a dozen characters and they're churning out, like you said, like, I mean, you want to spend most of the game in the strategy or tactics layer and not in a menu screen, making sure that grandson Muir doesn't have, has the right pauldron on his left pauldron.
Exactly, yeah. And that's, there's a lot of challenges for a system like that, especially when characters are like getting wounded and maybe they're not available, or in our game they're passing away, and like, their equipment goes back into the main pool, and you have to like, that was a very difficult thing in new XCOM.
Who has what?
Digging around, who has what stuff, and like, so we're just gonna have to be careful that we design that system really carefully so that it's easy to like equip all your guys and know where, especially when these named weapons, when you want to know where the foe hammer is, and you're like, who's got foe hammer? Damn it, where is it? And you're like, going through these menus trying to find it. Like, it needs to be very easy to know where your cool equipment is and who's got it and stuff like that. And there's one more of these. We should jump in. Oh, there's also this environment, which is very excellent. I think that might be what the third one is all about. No, it's not.
Nope.
Also, that guy's neck is amazing.
Yeah, that disturbs me.
Yeah, it's very bizarre, isn't it? That's awesome.
It must be a soccer star.
But that environment is very awesome. We have some environment stuff that we're going to be putting up probably today, along with this video. We'll have that, and a lot of the exploration that we've done is very cool. I think it has. I really like this kind of like muted color palette for everything, and it's. I think the characters will really stand out on it, and it's like. I think it's going like really. I think it's going in a great direction where it's like it's simple, has a great mood to it. And everything is a little bit muted, so the characters are going to stand out. It's super awesome. And then this third one, so this is more. I think that is this stuff actual papercraft? It's so hard to tell. Again,
I think it's like origami, like like one sheet of paper type.
It's really really excellent and awesome. I think it's great. And then again, like he's got all of this. We'll talk to Peter about this. Probably won't have a chance to talk to him until after the Kickstarter closes, but I really want to like get his take on these things. And then also it's like, he's got all this cool papercrafty stuff, but then he's got this shot, and I think that's like Game of Thrones fan art, right? Like that's supposed to be Joffrey with the Hound, which is really cool.
It reminds me a lot of Jeremy and Natividad's
it does. It really does.
Very similar to that.
Again, like you were talking about, Derek, where it's like you've got some like smoother forms and stuff on that.
Yeah, like the gorilla's forearm. Like you can see the facets in it, but then it's also curving along like his forearm. Those little details could really sell that look.
It's super cool. So yeah, we're gonna be looking at like how this impacts the plaquette still stuff, and then also the environments. Like I'm really interested in like a lot of the environment stuff. Also, amazing environment reference posted on our forums. I don't have that guy's name right now, but I don't know if you guys saw that huge dump that he put on there. And then other people chimed in and put more stuff on there, and it's really incredible. That's been super sweet, like having people help out. Also, the links of the like, top 10 weirdest places on Earth. Did you see those? Those links? This is very, very cool. Like we should totally look at them together later.
Yeah.
Very excellent reference of just like these totally insane, weird. There's just like salt flats that are all like have very thin standing water on them in somewhere in Europe, I think, and they're reflective basically.
Okay.
And so these shots of like a ground, I don't know, just having the horizon line totally reflected in this completely flat thing that is not a lake. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of like super awesome stuff up there that I think is great.
That's one thing that's going to be interesting, hard, I think difficult to figure out is like how are the demons interacting with the environment, and how are they showing them, like are they invading in a way that is like visually evident?
Yeah, and that's I really like when we talked about on the strategy layer, like we have there's that whole panic level concept from new XCOM, and that's actually, I feel like that's really a more discrete, like actually telegraphed mechanic from old XCOM, because that stuff is happening in old XCOM. You just don't really know.
Right.
You don't have a lot of like.
You have no bases in Africa, so you can't see that they're.
Yeah, that they're like totally
corrupting
ravaging North America, right? And you're like,
stuff.
I don't really know that that's happening until you get your monthly report, and you're like, oh, I guess, yeah, we're doing really poorly. Wow, this is awful. So that panic mechanic, but we've talked a lot about how it's like, it's not the most fun mechanic that's ever been in a video game. The panic stuff. It's like you feel like you've been entrusted with the world in XCOM, and all you can do is not mess up. You can't, even when you're doing great, the panic level is still increasing as you go, and eventually, countries are going to start backing out of the project, and it sucks. So we talked about like demonic corruption being an interesting placeholder or replacement for the panic level stuff. And I love, some of those environment shots, especially like that second one, having this really cool looking top-down, the top-down strategic map, having that be all 3D and look really awesome and stuff. And then having sections of the kingdom like get invaded, and then if you fail the tactical battle or do a poor job or whatever, that could actually like increase the corruption layer. And then if it gets too much, that whole section either is destroyed, or I really like that like it gets up and walks away. Like it actually becomes itself a demon and like leaves or something, or it just becomes so corrupted that like you can't get it back. It's not it's just gone, and you're kind of screwed, and you have to like give up on that section of the kingdom.
It's kind of like beating back the weeds in a way. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be a great way to visualize like encroaching demonness, and then like trying to fight it back in certain areas, but then other areas might encroach.
So you're thinking like during a tactical battle, you'd see yourself pushing back demon, or kind of post-battle?
No, I had kind of thought about. I mean, I think there should be some representation of it in the tactical battles. Like if you're going into a highly corrupted area, I think it should be visually there, or a not corrupted area, a more pure area. It should, it should be reflected when you're fighting the battle. But I kind of thought it would be more of a dynamic thing that you'd be seeing on the strategic map. As you run the epic timeline, the corruption would slowly, darken areas, and legions would grow on the that section of the realm or whatever, where it would like be painfully obvious as you hit as you flow the timeline that like, oh, bad stuff is happening in this area. You wouldn't have to like look at a chart to know which area is the most corrupted. It would be like immediately kind of obvious. And I the way that I've been thinking of it just from a gameplay perspective is that it's almost like it's like a pie chart. It's like the realm is just, and I think it needs to be like cut up in a more interesting way, but just from a pure gameplay perspective, it's like you have all these pie wedges, in the capitals in the center, and you have all these like pie wedges that you're trying to like maintain, and their purity level, I guess, like as the corruption seeps into the realm. and so it's all about like managing that, and like you know a whole chunk of the pie can get taken out if it gets too corrupted. I don't know where that's gonna go though. That's like we haven't talked about this like hardly at all in terms of like how what's the replacement for that kind of panic level stuff, because the game being like so reactionary, right? It's like when you're on that strategy layer in XCOM, the structure is that you just say go, and the timeline flows, and then it's like, oh, like either my research was finished, or like the demons are attacking this piece of the pie, like they're attacking this, and then you respond to it. But I think that panic level was so that you couldn't just sit there and grind, right? That's the main piece of it, is that you have to try to progress the story, progress the campaign, and do the main things, or else eventually parts of your funding are going to start getting taken out, and the difficulty will go up. Like that's, and it has a sort of feeling, I think the reason why I say it's like not fun is that you can win every tactical battle, but you can still lose the war. And like that's, I know that some people just did not really find that very compelling, I guess.
It's a big part of the tone of that game too, just that like outracing the invasion and, getting to the end at the right time where you have a good enough squad to be able to complete it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and then they have like the marathon mode where you can stretch it out, play more missions. I think that like figuring out the balance between that, because it's a great pressure to like really feel like, oh man, the kingdom is in danger, and if I'm just digging around and not doing what I should be doing here, like it's gonna have consequences, and my choices are gonna have consequences. But when I talk about this with people on the forums and stuff, I really talk about like, hey, as long as you're making good choices in the strategy layer, you will be able to continue having tactical battles where victory will move you closer to total victory.
Yeah, I think that's important. There's also another thing that I really like on the strategy layer is thinking about you're not given a pristine thing at the beginning. Like I really like that. And with the keeps, that was sort of the main idea with the keeps that are around the kingdom, is that you only have like 2 or 3 when the game starts. And then that's where you'll establish your initial bloodlines, and you'll have to protect those areas. There are other like destroyed keeps in these other pie wedges that once you gather enough resources, you can actually like spend some of them to kind of rebuild these castles that are around. That allows you to have like more bloodlines that you establish, and a better fighting force, a more diverse fighting force, which is cool. Like, and I think that's kind of cool, like giving you, you're not given a perfect thing. You feel like you can actually reclaim some of it. And so that you don't feel like you're having this constant backslide that you do in XCOM. I think that would be very cool. So plus it's very good for like keeping the number of bloodlines, keeping the bloodline management a little limited up in the front, so that we can teach players why it's cool, how to use it, all those things. You only have to make a few choices. You have a small hero squad, cool, and then your hero squad gets bigger over the course of the game. You have more bloodlines that you can establish. Like I think it maps the kind of like ramp of the game very well. Yeah, but on the strategic view, like, is there anything? What's like the hardest like tech challenge on the strategic view? Because I see it as a big design challenge. Like it's and a UI challenge.
That ties into the tech side, because we're going to have to iterate on it. So we want to build the technology so you guys can try different things. And that's different than if you're coming in with, here's how it's going to be, and then we can just build the tech to make that one thing awesome. I think on both sides, the tactical side and the strategic side, we want to build it so you guys can try different things. Both you guys have some programming background, but we need to look at like what kind of tools do we want to build to make it so you guys can easily change things and swap things out and switch them, and how much investment we want to put into that up front versus just having you guys edit a text file. Like both kind of work, but I think on both of those we really need to look at an iterative process. We can't just, as we plan this out, say, here's 1 month and we're going to have the strategic layer done, and then here's this other one and we're going to have tactical. That we kind of got to look at, we're going to try something and then we're going to see where it's broken. Have people test it. So,
and that's where a lot of the discussions on the forums kind of come into play, about things like how are we going to do turn order, how are we going to do actions, and building the base systems to be able to support as many knobs as possible so we can test these things out will help us get to the right the right answer quicker. And then we've talked a bit about doing some more paper prototyping for the strategy layer. So there's ways we can hopefully help that, so we're not just going in with a blank slate. Be like, we need to be able to do everything always.
We also have really shitty Unity.
We have Unity prototypes.
Unity prototype. Like that. That thing is actually like I think we learned a lot from just messing around with that thing about like what's gonna make sense. Like how many generations, how many keeps do you need, how many heroes do you need to start? Like all these things. Like we've already learned quite a bit about that. Sorta.
We'll have to. We should probably go back and do a big
There's some
like,
more that could be
postmortem
done.
on that.
Could be done there, yeah.
Yeah. From the art side, like one thing we still, know how the strategy layer is going to look in terms of even if it's, a kind of a more 2D map or a 3D realm with, buildings. I mean, a lot of that's going to come down to scope. But what are some of your thoughts on the strategy layer, Derek?
Well, just in terms of like, I think having everything tied together with time and the passing of time, and like even fighting off time would be cool. Like the demons could represent like the passage of time or something, and so that trying to incorporate that into that layer would be cool. Like showing corrupted areas could be like super aged, or it's like it becomes so old that it's completely unusable. You know what I mean? Like
that's awesome.
It's
really
a dusty
cool.
desolation kind of
yeah.
thing. I think that's where like if we can do seasonal changes on the art side, that's where like I'd love to be able to hit the time button and then it's not like seeing the day-night cycle like I would in XCOM as much because we're doing bigger scale, but being able to see kind of spring, summer, fall, winter would be amazing.
That'd be rad. And then
I think
showing
that's
that
also
like, swooping across like a landscape or something would be really
so awesome. So awesome. Like, and I think that really fits well with kind of how we want, sort of what we've learned from that Unity prototype is that like what feels good, how many years passing when you hit the space bar and you flow the time. I think that seeing the seasons change like at a pretty metered pace, it's like I think that would look really amazing, and it would also give you that really supports the epic timeline thing. And I think that the years don't have to pass so quickly that they would just be like blinking, just like blinking through the seasons. Yeah. So I think that's really.
It could also be cool because even like if there's an invasion that you have to go to, it could be whatever season, and it could be rapidly changing.
Yeah, and that part is rough where it's like
it's just a lot of art.
It's just right. Like having like, do we need each tile? Does each tile set have to have like 4 different seasonal versions of
how
itself?
How can we do that in a way that would be doable? Without being super expensive, have like the winter's tile set being completely different. How can we layer things or even change out certain color? I mean, the more abstract in some ways some of those elements are, like the easier that might get. But it's awesome. Right. I do like that, in the original XCOM, that like whether you're fighting at night or during the day makes a difference. And it'd be awesome if it was like, we've got it's going to be snowing. It's wintertime. That's going to change how we fight.
That could work into the design. Strategies. Like a racial trait could be more hardy in the snow or better night vision. Or,
you have to drink a hot to drink.
You have to drink a hot drink
before using
or
your
a cool
stamina.
drink. Yeah. Oh my God, hilarious.
Something like that.
Yeah, we did play a lot of Monster Hunter. Different game.
I don't think you could hit the passage of time over the head too much. Like I think it's such a strong theme that like incorporating that in as many aspects of visually in the game and like conceptually too, like throughout.
And I love that a lot of the demon stuff that we've been kind of having you do. It's a little bit blue sky. Like I wish that there was a more like a stronger kind of vision of like this is exactly how the demons work in my mind. This is But I mean, it's cool that we have time to explore it and we're gonna figure it out. But the part that I've liked the most, the sort of central theme, is that they are either timeless or represent the effects of time. They are the effects of time.
Yeah, so that's the enemy of everybody, right? Because everybody dies.
Yeah.
So
and I love that. I love that it's a foil to like the heroes and the bloodlines and that stuff. Is that having like perseverance be like a big theme of the game or a big point of the game, and sort of like legacies through the ages and stuff, where you're just constantly working against this force that is like, and that's another big pillar of the design, is that like you're not going to be able to circumvent it. There's no fountain of youth in Massive Chalice. There's no magic ring that you put on that like reverses or stops the flow of time. Like, no, it's like everybody ages, everybody dies. That's something that you just have to deal with. And having the demons represent these, like rust and erosion and like it's
like
just
that.
it's weird,
Cool.
and then also like I mean the Rust thing too. Like oh yeah, that's right. I remember we were talking about this a week or two ago, and I was like, oh, you have to look up a Rust monster.
Oh yeah,
Dungeons and Dragons Rust monster
Yeah,
because it's just weird. It's just funny looking. But I like that concept of like the demons having attacks that they could use on your equipment, especially your named bloodline relic equipment.
it'd be so sad you would lose your sword.
Yeah, you've got your awesome sword, and
that
then,
was passed down from generation.
Rust monster like messes it up. Somebody also suggested in the forums having like quests to reforge broken equipment. That's really sweet.
Yeah,
like,
I like
that's
that idea.
something
Like as the generations, the castles and the equipment, you're essentially embellishing it and embossing it and adding on another name. But as you fight the demons, it's like the sand blowing against a wall. Like it gets rid of all that and just reduces it down to the base. It's not like reversing time, but it's wearing away on the as a counterpoint to, like you said, to the timeline.
Yeah.
It's a kind of cool contrast.
And it'd be cool as like an event, we've talked a bit about having kind of an events layer where we can do more interesting kind of one-off events that are procedurally generated, like a game like King of Dragon Pass or Crusader Kings and some of this stuff. I'd love to the idea of like, oh man, like this amazing heirloom has been destroyed and you need to go reforge it. That sounds great. Micromanaging like the repair values on all of my equipment does not sound as great.
No, having them be big discrete events though could be
big
really
discrete
cool.
events I think is really cool.
I agree that like individual like 49 out of 85 and then having to it's like that's no one's. I don't know if a lot of people enjoy those kinds of like
Some
repair
people probably
systems that you
do,
see
but
in-
man,
maybe people do.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
people
And
do.
maybe it's something that like when something is passed down, like its values can change, but while it's equipped to that one hero, it's the same. Like I think there's some ways we can chunk that so it's a little bit. It's just not as fiddly. And then also you don't have this like, oh, should I attack with my bronze sword or my silver sword? Because my silver sword, it needs some more repair sooner, but
That just makes me sigh as a gamer. Like when I'm faced with those choices, like I don't know. I just always want to use the stronger one no matter what, and then deal with it later, and then I'm sad.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. It's just
silver sword has broken. Oh no.
yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I think in general the decision should be, or do I use a sword or do I use a arrow? As opposed to which sword I'm using.
The higher level
maybe
stuff,
use
I
a
think
spear instead of a sword, but the higher level. Yeah.
And then and hopefully we have like the ability to do different attacks with that. Like if I have a spear, maybe I can hit 2 squares away. Have a different animation that looks awesome. If we can do that, and that's more exciting to me. Like how can I okay, I'm fighting against a demon that's a hand-to-hand melee range demon or a melee demon, kind of like a chrysalid in XCOM, and I can surround him with spear guys and basically poke at him out of his range, or he's going to come in and maul me. And so how do I approach that guy versus a ranged demon versus a hybrid that can do both? I'm excited about getting into that. We talked about classes in real big general scope, and I think like that's worked its way into your art as well. That we keep talking about like warrior just because that's the easiest thing. It's the easiest thing to talk about.
Lots of swords.
So you're like, dude with a sword.
Yeah.
But really, when we get into like, okay, how do we make a unique feeling character where you he's got some neat attacks and you know what he's about. What is that going to be like, and how can that work into the art too? I think it's going to change the way that the art comes along.
For
as
sure,
well.
a lot. It's going to be like juggling all the classes visually is going to be an interesting challenge.
Yeah.
Juggler could be a class.
Yeah, totally.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
We'd also, I remember one idea we had on Brazen was like the blood hammer. And like I've been thinking about, I don't know why, I was thinking about that in the shower this morning. Is that
nice?
That sounds terrible, right? We're like, what is that? Why was I
what
thinking
you do
about
with the blood hammer?
Yeah, like what was I thinking about a
whatever.
blood hammer? But I like I don't know, just demonic technology that fits in with the classes where it's like if we do have a warrior like with a big two-handed hammer, like having a weird blood hammer that actually like sucks some of his own blood out and then does AoE blood explosions when he like hits guys with it. Like there's so many cool ideas, and it's like oh, that actually like you know
totally have a mech. You could have a
it.
demon mech.
Demon mech.
Yeah, it's like a demon, and then when you kill it, you like climb into it, and then it's a mech. It's like a giant mech guy. Biomech.
That's crazy. There was some of that early stuff that you had where the demons were like almost like a suit of armor with like a ghost or like an apparition coming out of it, and it was like I like that concept so much because you could really see that armor. It was almost like demon power armor or something. Putting that on, but it had like all these awesome teeth around the what is this?
Neck.
Around like the collarbone area. No, it was way wider than the neck, right?
Right.
Like it would not be up to the neck.
around
It
the
would be like
shoulders.
biting into your like shoulders and chest and like collarbone area in a really like kind of painful looking way. That's so cool. That's so cool. So yeah, I think we're done.
Demon Mechs killed it.
Yeah, Demon Mechs done. That's it. Yeah, I don't know. Was there anything else you want to talk about? Programming. So programming's hard. Art is hard. Design is hard. That's, making games, and we have to do all three of those things in order to make a game. And people have already put some concept art on the forums for like cool demons and stuff. There's some really cool stuff up there.
Yeah, really cool.
So yeah, I mean, we're open to all this. I think like working with the community is gonna be really great, and we'll see.
There's
where
some
it
code
goes.
on the forums too.
I saw that.
Yeah, I didn't
That's
think.
the first
did
time
you
I've
look at
ever
that at
gotten
all?
a code
I
contribution.
didn't dig into
before.
that at all. There's like that huge chunk of Lua code that guy put
And
up.
great design doc.
It's
before,
incredible,
too.
and then he had all these images about like how the bloodline system could work and stuff. And it's like, I mean, we haven't gotten into it on that level. Like that's amazing and
we haven't
awesome.
even had time to go back through all the stuff on the forums.
Although I can't
think
wait
next
to,
week's
like-
going to be great just to dig through
Yeah,
all these
digging
awesome
into that stuff
contributions and see
and-
where we can
Oh, man.
start connecting some dots.
It's gonna be so awesome. Yeah, and like Friday, we're gonna be making this game officially on Friday. Like, it's so exciting to actually like, have the campaign wrap up and then actually start doing it. We got to start planning our first team stream as well.
Yep.
When that's gonna be. So that'll be sweet.
true.
All right, cool. I think we're done.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
Massive Chalice!